is going to be a bit different from the usual walk because it's going to take us around Porthcawl, looking at things that you may or may not be aware of. Porthcawl does have some history, and I'd like to sort of point out a few things as we walk around. So the reason I've brought you here to the starting point is because here, if you'd like to move forward a bit, you'll see a couple of... Yeah, you stay there. All right, and on the plaque there, it tells us that these are the last remaining rails of the Dyffryn, Llinvi and Porthcawl Railway, which was opened in 1825 to transport minerals from the Llinvi Valley to Porthcawl, where they were shipped out from the harbour, the newly built harbour, to wherever they were supposed to go. So Porthcawl didn't exist before 1825, but the harbour was the start of the growth of the town. Now the Jennings building there, which is as you can see, is in the process of regeneration. The reason it's still there is it's a Grade 2 listed building, and it's the last remaining building of the Porthcawl docks. And it's been through various incarnations since it ceased to be a warehouse, because that's why it was called the Jennings building, because it was owned by Jennings and Company, timber importers, who bought the building in 1911, although the building itself goes back to the 1830s. And so it is preserved for that reason. And now that it's been cleaned up and all the rendering's been taken off, it looks a lot more attractive, and it's going to become a restaurant. And upstairs there's going to be flats, workspace. I think they call them work-life spaces, so people running their own businesses can live and work in the same place. So the harbour itself, the docks, was over there on the far side on what is now called the Salt Lake. And it's called the Salt Lake because when the docks closed, it was turned into a swimming and boating lake. Okay, the docks closed because by the early 20th century, the Port Talbot and Barry docks had been opened, and they were bigger because ships had got bigger by then, and they weren't affected by the tides. Porthcawl is a tidal port, so ships could only come in and out at high tide. But by the time the dock closed, the town had reinvented itself as a seaside resort. Now the building of the docks was the work of John Brogden, and you know there's a pub called the Brogden Hotel on New Road. Well, it's John Brogden, and later his son James joined the firm, and they created the docks, and the railway line that used to run in Porthcawl, which some of you may remember, where it's now the Hillsborough car park, that was the marshalling yards for the railway line. And the breakwater here was built sometime in the 1860s because the force of the prevailing wind made it difficult for ships to get in and out of the harbour. So they built this massive breakwater, which still stands to this day and will no doubt stand for a good deal longer. And the lighthouse was built at the same time. So that's basically how Porthcawl started. And as I say, I tell you what, we'll move a little bit further away, and I can tell you a bit more, hopefully, away from the noise.
We started our walk here at the Jennings building, walking some 3.5 miles today, starting at around 2 o'clock, making our way across the seafront towards Rest Bay, turning to go down Locks Lane towards Nottage. Passing Nottage Forge, we walked through the wilderness around the lake, where there are some beautiful views. Then back towards town and the waterfront for a cup of tea.
I forgot to point out, the little building there was the customs house. So when goods were brought in or taken out, they had to be declared at that building there. Okay, Right, we'll move on a bit further now.
Just a second. Where you saw the railway line, it was a tramway drawn by horses.
Yeah.
And it converted to steam engines in the 1850s, 60s.
63.
And the original jetty went not all the way out where the lighthouse is now. The original one for the first harbour, which is the marina now, was built in the late 1820s and then extended by Brogden to where it is now. And that lighthouse, the new light, was just put in about 2 years ago at the cost of about £60,000. And the tower you've got here is the Pilot Lookout Station, which was built in 1870 and is now the National Coast Watch Institution, as you can see there. And it started operations just over a year ago. And this was a bonded warehouse, the Jennings building, where they kept all the stuff before they declared it for the customs.
Okay. Right, thank you, Jeff. This is my assistant, by the way. Yes. He fills in the bits I forget. Thank you. Let's move on a bit further. This, as I'm sure you know, is Cosy Corner. The Porthcawl became a seaside resort when before, in fact, it was in the 1880s, 1890s. So while the docks were still in operation, but then when the docks closed, that it became just a seaside resort. But it was very successful, and it thrived and prospered. And a lot of the buildings you see on the front there were constructed about this time. And when we go past the Pavilion, if you look down there, you'll see Esplanade Avenue, typical houses built at the end of the Victorian and early Edwardian period as guest houses. Okay. Now, Cosy Corner in the 1920s and 30s had a cinema and a skating rink and various shops. So you can see that Porthcawl had quite a lot to offer in those days, rather more than it has today. And of course the fun fair, which started in the 1920s, that was in full swing. And the railway, which had been built to bring in minerals, now brought in people, and they came in their thousands. So, as I say, during the 20s and 30s particularly, they were the sort of the golden period of Porthcawl, and that's when the Grand Pavilion was built, 1932, and the Seabank Hotel, I'm not sure when, but sometime in the 1930s, in the Art Deco style. Okay, please feel free to ask questions if you have any.
What was it called? Cosy Corner?
It was cosy.
Somebody told me it was a cinema and it was called Cosy Cinema.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not sure if that's true.
Yes, it was.
As Malcolm said, it was like an old aircraft hangar.
That's right.
Big building.
Yeah.
So it was called the Cosy Cinema.
And at the time, Porthcawl also had two cinemas in the town itself, the Coliseum and the casino.
So one's above the spa, which you'll probably point out later.
Yeah.
There's a bit of a balcony there. Is that
That's right. That's it.
The
Yeah.
railway station over there somewhere. Yeah.
The railway station originally was up by where the level crossing was. The top. You know where Station Hill
Yes.
ends, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's where the original railway station was, and that closed in 1916 because they wanted something that was a bit further down. Because part of the problem was they had to close the level crossing gates, and that was causing traffic hold-ups.
Yeah.
So they moved the station down a bit further.
A bit further down towards
Yeah.
that roundabout.
Yeah, but
It's where the car park.
On the dual carriage, on the road.
yeah. So
On the car.
yeah, the dual carriageway, I think I'm right in saying, was the line of the railway track, wasn't it? And and the dual carriage then runs out towards Nottage, and that was the railway line originally. Yeah.
Maybe she was catching the train every day to Cleves College
Yeah.
in Cardiff.
Yeah.
Early 60s.
And
Yeah.
there weren't many people on that train.
No.
Honestly, I could count with my one hand. Maybe.
Yeah.
Hence why beaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you were late, they'd wait. Can you believe it? My girl's running to catch the train.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
hang on, she is coming. I can see her behind me.
Those are the days, eh?
Yeah.
Right, okay, let's move on then. As my assistants pointed out to me, something I didn't know, which is that the old lifeboat station is there. Is that where Jaipur?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I believe they used to have to wheel it out
Yeah.
and take it down to the slip
Horses.
with horses.
Yeah.
And was the slipway there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And do you know when the present lifeboat station was built?
No, it was 20 years ago, maybe. I don't know, because it wasn't
Right.
Porthcawl then.
Okay. So that's where the lifeboat was up there. They had to wheel it out down to the slipway. During the war, the RAF had air sea rescue launches based, and I think they were actually in the Jennings building, and
For
wheel,
maintenance,
yeah,
it was
yeah,
engineering hangar.
and then launched from the slipway.
And accommodation for the guys living there as well.
Right. Okay. What I haven't actually pointed out is where we're actually going. So I'll just tell you now. We've halted. We're going to walk along the front here and up to the end of Locks Lane, and then we're going to walk along Locks Lane to Nottage, and then we'll come back into Porthcawl along Hale Goedwig, and we're going to go through the wilderness for part of the way and then back to Porthcawl. So it should take about an hour and a half, I reckon. This is the Grand Pavilion, opened in 1932, very popular during the war as a dance hall, well, and since the war, I guess. And of course, it now hosts concerts and plays and so forth. There are actually two, for those who have not been inside it. There's the main hall, and there's, I think, what they used to call the lesser hall. I don't know if they call it that now. There's a sort of small sort of downstairs. The stage door, that's right, yeah. Yeah, yeah. But that was built by Porthcawl Urban District Council. You're all familiar with the Seabank Hotel. What you may not know is that originally there was a house called Seabank House, which was the home of the Brogdons, the Brogden family that built Porthcawl. Then at some point it became a school, and I think it became a hotel in this building sometime in the mid-1930s. Okay. And now, Jeff, you have a story about the rugby team that was...
Yeah, all the international teams that used to come to play against Wales in Cardiff would stay here because it was internationally recognised. You wouldn't think it now. So we used to meet all the footballers and rugby players from the South Africans, New Zealand and everything. When we were kids, come down here and get their autographs. I think it was 1982. There was an international team, which I believe were the Australians, staying here. When Porthcawl got cut off by a blizzard, I think it was January or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And they had to helicopter them out to get to Cardiff or to wherever they were going. Otherwise, they'd have been sat here for 3 or 4 days before the roads got cleared. But it was very well known for autographs, and Dennis Law, Bobby Moore, and all that lot used to come and stay down here. These houses you see behind here are fairly new, but 1960s, 70s, I think. During the war, this was an American camp here. They were American, mostly tents, and they even had a cinder strip where they'd use aircraft like Stork aircraft for SOE operations in Europe. They had a landing strip here that the Americans used to use, but this was an American camp, as was Hutchins Close and further behind. As you can see, all nice new houses now. But the American presence here was quite considerable for the build-up to D-Day during the war.
I just want to point out another famous Porthcawl landmark. We're not going up to have a closer look at it because we're going back down Lock's Lane now. But the rest home was built around about 1873, and it was. Some people think it was built for the miners, but it wasn't. It was built for anybody who needed convalescence and fresh air. But of course, inevitably, a lot of the residents were miners, and it continued in that function, I think, until fairly recently, probably, yeah,
3 years ago.
3 years ago, yeah. And now I think it's been converted into flats. But it's stood empty for quite a long time. And of course, Porthcawl U3A, that was their headquarters. All their activities took place in there. And once they were turfed out of there, it was a big loss because, of course, now we have to scatter wherever we can find a venue in Porthcawl. Nottage Forge, a very old building, as you can see, but apparently it's still in use as a forge. It still operates as a forge. So a little bit of Nottage history.